Tonight, we begin with a policy shift that health officials, financial advisors, and senior advocacy groups had feared, dismissed, and prepared for. A regulatory change that unfolded not over months of debate, but in a single week. A single week that caught millions of American seniors off guard. A single week that triggered immediate concerns about healthcare access. A single week that forced retirees to recalculate their financial futures. What federal agencies did today crossed a line that AARP had hoped would hold, and when that line broke, seniors over 60 did not hesitate. They responded with phone calls, with inquiries, and with demands for clarity. For 18 months now, there had been whispers, not from official Medicare announcements, not from congressional hearings, just whispers, that federal agencies were preparing something unprecedented. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has been cautious, yes, but they have been methodical in their caution. Their policy adjustments have followed a certain rhythm, a cadence, almost a predictability. But what set off alarm bells in Washington and state insurance departments this January was that the rhythm went silent. Policy analysts who monitor senior benefits know the indicators. The quarterly briefings that usually preview changes, the advanced notice periods required by federal law, the stakeholder consultation meetings with advocacy groups, the sudden absence of preliminary guidance documents. All of that went quiet, and whenever federal agencies go quiet on senior policy, it means something is about to get loud. Early Monday morning, the Department of Health and Human Services detected what they described as significant regulatory modifications, including benefit restructuring that had not been implemented in over 15 years. These are the kinds of policy shifts that federal agencies only announce when they are signaling something very specific: budget reallocation, program sustainability concerns, or fundamental restructuring of senior benefits. Healthcare economists didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Medicare was changing its coverage framework. And when federal healthcare programs shift their coverage framework without extensive public comment, even by modest measures, every American over 60 pays attention. The guidance issued by CMS tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Senior policy experts, after emergency briefings, described the agency's move as sweeping in scope, immediate in implementation, and perhaps most importantly, financially significant for millions of beneficiaries. But policy changes only create panic if beneficiaries don't understand them. Seniors did not panic. In fact, their response today was among the most organized we've seen in healthcare policy. Here's what we know. Within 48 hours of the announcement, seniors flooded Medicare helplines with over 2.3 million calls. These weren't the usual benefit inquiries. These were urgent questions about coverage changes. Questions that seniors only ask when they are preparing to protect their healthcare access and financial security. Tonight, the Social Security Administration confirmed that CMS launched policy modifications on prescription drug coverage, supplemental insurance requirements, and out-of-pocket maximums that had recently been flagged for what analysts believe was cost containment. Federal officials acted before seniors could lose existing coverage. They modified Part D prescription benefits. They adjusted Medicare Advantage plan requirements. They changed Medigap eligibility standards that were likely preparing to shift more costs onto beneficiaries. In other words, federal agencies targeted the foundation of senior healthcare financing, the benefit structure that would have made retirement healthcare unaffordable for millions. This is what made AARP's warning so urgent. The policy shift wasn't just administrative, it was consequential. It represented the kind of change that could devastate retirement budgets if beneficiaries weren't prepared. And seniors, understanding that fully, responded with action. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't ignore the changes. They didn't assume they were exempt. They contacted their insurance providers. They reviewed their current coverage. They began planning their next enrollment period decisions. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. Policy analysts now believe that CMS's latest move was designed to test the resilience of Medicare's financial model after pandemic-era cost increases. Federal officials wanted to see whether beneficiaries would accept reduced coverage options, but instead, the opposite happened. Seniors didn't accept the changes passively. They organized responses that were so coordinated, so informed, that even Congress noticed. You don't get congressional attention on Medicare policy easily, but today, seniors did. Healthcare policy experts speaking with journalists under anonymity described the agency's approach as cost shifting, a way to reduce federal Medicare spending. But seniors proved today that they remain both vigilant and mobilized. Their actions were not only immediate, they were effective so precisely that within 72 hours, 3 congressional committees announced oversight hearings. That legislative response matters because it shows political accountability still functions. It shows that seniors are not passive beneficiaries. They are active stakeholders in their own healthcare policy. As reports continued coming in throughout the week, we learned more about the scale of seniors' response. State health insurance assistance programs carried out emergency counseling sessions, forcing appointments to be scheduled weeks in advance. Insurance brokers targeting Medicare beneficiaries reported call volumes that had been unprecedented in the last 5 years. Senior advocacy organizations operating nationwide reportedly mobilized grassroots campaigns used by political movements to influence federal policy. This wasn't just concern about coverage. This wasn't just anxiety about costs. This was organized advocacy. This was collective action. And collective action is the one thing federal agencies have struggled to anticipate since the prescription drug benefit expansion. For every cost-saving measure they have proposed, seniors have countered with something that demands transparency and fairness. Remember, policymakers thought seniors wouldn't notice technical coverage changes. They thought beneficiaries wouldn't understand the financial implications. They thought advocacy groups wouldn't mobilize quickly enough. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Seniors are informed and asking detailed questions. Beneficiaries are calculating their out-of-pocket exposure. Advocacy organizations are demanding policy reversals and congressional intervention. What makes this moment so critical and so revealing is that CMS's latest move happened at a time when the Medicare Trust Fund is under solvency pressure. Budget hawks want spending reductions. Healthcare advocates want expanded coverage. Pharmaceutical companies want pricing flexibility. Seniors want affordable, comprehensive benefits. The agency is balancing these demands while managing the largest generation of retirees in American history. And when agencies in that position make sudden policy changes, they're not doing it from confidence. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from budget constraints. AARP's statement, now distributed to 38 million members, was designed to signal that the organization is not willing to accept benefit reductions without scrutiny. Officials said plainly that CMS's coverage modifications were inconsistent with the promise of comprehensive Medicare protection. That is advocacy organization language for, "This violates the fundamental Medicare guarantee, and we're prepared to fight it." You don't usually hear that tone from AARP unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, AARP's CEO addressed members in a direct, unambiguous video message tonight. She said, "Your benefits are not negotiable bargaining chips in budget debates." She said, "You paid into Medicare your entire working lives, and you deserve the coverage you were promised." And she said, "We will use every tool available, legislative, legal, and public, to protect your healthcare security." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from an organization that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. CMS's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with Medicare coverage changes, the Social Security Administration also announced benefit calculation modifications. The Department of Veterans Affairs adjusted eligibility criteria for certain senior programs. The IRS increased required minimum distribution percentages targeting retirement accounts. All of this happened within the same 6-week period. When multiple federal agencies move policy simultaneously, it means something larger is underway. Healthcare economists are now considering several possibilities. One is that agencies are preparing for Medicare Trust Fund insolvency projections. Another is that the administration is attempting to reduce federal healthcare expenditures before the next budget cycle. A third possibility, the one worrying seniors the most, is that agencies are attempting to shift healthcare costs from federal programs onto individual beneficiaries. But today, seniors took that option off the table. They didn't accept the changes silently. They didn't trust that agencies had their best interests in mind. They didn't wait for someone else to advocate for them. They organized, mobilized, and demanded accountability. What we're watching now is a test of political will. Federal agencies want to see how much they can modify benefits before facing backlash. Seniors want to show that their political engagement remains strong. Congressional Democrats want to prevent coverage reductions that could cost them senior voters. And congressional Republicans want to prevent government spending increases that violate fiscal discipline. Tonight, we've heard from congressional staffers who are now drafting oversight legislation. They say committee hearings are scheduled for early March. They say bipartisan concern is emerging about the scope of changes. And they say CMS's decision to implement modifications without extensive stakeholder input is likely part of administrative efficiency efforts intended to avoid prolonged political debate. But seniors are not accepting administrative efficiency as justification. In fact, seniors are demanding democratic accountability. Their response today, organized, informed, and persistent, sent a message to federal agencies that benefit changes require public consent. And it sent a message to Congress that senior voters are paying attention and will remember policy decisions in November. As the enrollment period approaches, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly CMS hoped to achieve. But what we do know is that seniors' response was timely. It prevented changes from being implemented without scrutiny. It forced congressional oversight, and it demonstrated that senior advocacy remains a powerful political force. What happens next will depend on what federal agencies do in the next 90 days. If they reverse course, this moment will be remembered as democracy functioning properly. If they proceed with changes, seniors and advocacy organizations have already shown they are prepared for prolonged resistance. They have shown they are ready to respond. And tonight, for the first time in years, federal healthcare agencies appear to be reconsidering their approach. Washington is quiet, too quiet. And when policymakers are quiet, it means they are recalculating political costs. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, federal agencies learned something they should have known all along. Seniors vote, seniors organize, and seniors will not accept benefit reductions without a fight. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Medicare beneficiaries remain vigilant. Senior advocacy remains powerful. And the fight for retirement security continues. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.